mom tried to recruit me into a scam at my job, but I laughed at her and refused, choosing my freedom over her manipulation. My mom was a truly evil person. I don't mean like she grounded me or spanked me once. I mean she was a sadistic, horrible excuse for a human whose only concern in life was fulfilling her own desires and hurting people in the process. I've been told that, at one point, she was a good person who tried to be kind and helpful to others, though I have to take other people's word for it. She was a highly intelligent woman, who even went to a very prestigious college locally and received a master's degree in psychology. She had an affinity for the human mind, for how it worked. She was like Rain Man with understanding people and how to get inside their heads. This I can attest to. While maybe at first she set out to get that degree to help others, the only purpose it served was to aid her in her endeavors to lie, cheat, manipulate, control, abuse, and ultimately, mentally break anyone she saw fit. Here are just a few of my stories of living with a truly evil person, separated by marks to differentiate them more easily. I was only conceived because my mother and the next door neighbor despised each other. My mom's idea of fun was to seduce the neighbor's fiancé and convince him to leave her. Then, she intentionally got pregnant, and once that was confirmed, she kicked him out of the house while I was still in the womb. Doctors recommended she get an abortion, as I had a hole in the base of my spine. She asked if there were any risks to her, to which she was informed the only risk would be to me, as there was a high probability I would be born with a painful, debilitating, and lifelong deformity. I went full term, and eventually, I was born. She took great pleasure in recounting the story, saying things like, "You were born out of spite, you'll only ever know spite," or, "You were born because I had a use for you, and that's your only purpose in life, and I could have aborted you. I should have, you owe me." To this day, I have never met the man who got her pregnant. It's important for me to make it clear that rarely was my mother physically abusive to us kids, though the times she was to someone else were terrifying. She was a very large woman, standing at about 5 feet 10 inches and weighing in around 250 pounds. She often used her size to intimidate people, and when that didn't work, she used it to beat them. When I was very young, I think around 5, my mom had one of my sisters and me in the car. I remember thinking the car was making an unusually loud noise. I remember my sister crying quietly in the backseat. I remember a loud screech and feeling myself thrust forward in the seat. The seat belt hurt. My mom practically launched herself out of the car and slammed the door shut before we even came to a stop. I looked back at my older sister and tried to express my confusion. She told me to be quiet and cover my ears. I did, and for a little while, I couldn't hear anything. Then, my sister started to cry inconsolably, so I uncovered my ears. Then I heard screaming and banging coming from inside the house. My mom had gone into the house. The yelling sounded very angry. I knew one voice was my mom's, the other I couldn't identify. Then my mom's voice got louder, as did the banging. The other voice went from angry to scared. I remember it sounding like some of the horror movies I used to peek at through cracked doors late at night. My sister was begging me to cover my ears, almost hysterical, trying to force my hands back over my ears. But then the door flew open and my mom came running out. She launched herself into the car. The screeching happened again, and the car got loud again. I don't remember anything else about that. It wasn't until many years later that it was explained to me that my mom and my aunt were having an ongoing feud at the time, and it finally culminated when my mom, completely drunk, listened to an angry voicemail from my aunt. She loaded my sister and me into the car and drove drunk to my aunt's house. The noises I heard were them arguing, and after a while, my mom snapped. The banging was her breaking furniture that my aunt was using to barricade herself. Then she broke a chair over my aunt and beat her with one of the legs. She almost died. Apparently, my aunt is a lovely woman with a heart of gold. She has loved my sisters and me, and I've always envied my cousin for that. Once, when I was a little older, daycare age, my mom came to pick me up. She was being weird, but really nice. It seemed odd, but to my brain, it was the best. She was in such a good mood and wanted me to be too. I remember her talking funny, though one of the school staff people who was helping load kids into cars seemed very concerned. She was asking my mom weird questions and eventually asked me if I was sure I wanted to go with her. This was a crazy question. It's Mom, and she was so happy to see me. Why wouldn't I go with her? I remember my mom having a really weird smile, but looking past me. I don't know how long the drive was, but I remember it being weird and jerky. Then, my mom started to panic, grabbing my arm very tightly and shoving me into the floor of the backseat. She threw a bunch of stuff on top of me and said we were playing hide and seek and that I had to be absolutely silent. I told her I didn't want to play, but she said I had to and to shut up and be still so we could start. The car stopped and then I heard a man's voice that was muffled. They talked for a little while, and I remember the man saying, "Just go home now, or you'll be taken." She thanked him, and we went home. I heard the door open and close. She left. I don't know how long I was in there, but I was so scared to break the rules of the game that I stayed still. After what felt like a very long time, I needed to pee, but I knew it was against the rules to move. I stayed there and eventually just peed myself because holding it hurt too much. I started crying but made sure I didn't move or make too much noise because those were the rules. I remember eventually the door flew open and my older sister pulled the blankets off me. I started crying and apologizing to her. I was so sorry I peed myself and so sorry I broke the rules. Don't tell Mom I broke the rules, please. She just broke down and hugged me for a long time while I cried. It was dark now, and I fell asleep in her arms. My mom had started drinking as soon as she woke up that day. When she picked me up, she was so drunk and so high on who knows what. She was barely coherent enough to talk to the school aide. On the way home, a cop pulled her over. I'm surprised the cop let her go, as it was a town and didn't know there was a kid in the car. But I will never understand why the aide let me go with her. I found out since then that I had been in the car for several hours. My sisters desperately tried to wake my mom, who was passed out, to ask where I was. When they couldn't, they went out looking for me. The eldest sister, of my two sisters, found me forgotten in the car. They never told my mom and washed my clothes so she wouldn't know about the accident. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. When I was in kindergarten and the internet was just starting to become a thing, my mom found what she believed to be love through an online chat room. The man she found went by the name Jimmy, and lived in Indiana. He came to visit once, brought my sisters a t-shirt and a pair of shoes, and me a remote-controlled hobby car. That was enough for my mom to move us from our hometown of Helena, Montana, to South Haven, Indiana. Her and my grandparents fought a lot during the following weeks. Then, the house was packed into a truck. The car was put on a trailer. The four of us were loaded in it, and off we went. After several days and a few times getting lost, we arrived at Jimmy's house. There was Jimmy, his adult son, and two kids, a boy and a girl, who were roughly the same ages as my sisters. I have no idea who the kids were, they were just there. My mom and Jimmy spent the next few days in his room, and I never saw him come out. His son sat in the living room, drinking beer and watching TV, while the five of us kids stayed in a room with a single mattress on the floor, 2 or 3 pillows, blankets, and some sleeping bags. The room had clothes and toys all around the edges, piled up. The kids were polite, and we spent the time playing, but they were quiet and nervous, and didn't talk much about themselves. They just asked about us. I remember my oldest sister tried to go for a walk once, but there was yelling, and she came back to the room with a red cheek and crying. My other sister and I tried to figure out what was wrong, but she just sat in the corner, curled up and crying. The little girl told us the kids weren't allowed out of the room, except to eat. After a few days, I don't know how many, I remember my sister shaking me awake. She seemed nervous, but she told me to get up. I think it was nighttime, or maybe morning. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. I got up onto my knees and looked around. On the mattress were the boy and the girl, and they were naked. They just sat there like that and told us to take off our clothes. My youngest sister of my two sisters and I asked them why, and they said it was a game and we had to play, so we got naked, too. My older sister just sat in the corner, hugging her knees and watching us. Then the door opened. It was Jimmy's son. My sister and I were so afraid we were going to get yelled at, but he just cracked open his beer and leaned in the doorway. He scratched his neck and said, "Carry on." The memory ends there. I'm thankful for that. My sisters and I have never spoken of it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It seemed shortly after that my mom broke up with Jimmy, and we got our own place in Portale, Indiana. I've never shared that story with anyone. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When I was about 9, we lived in the suburbs of Gary, Indiana. It was a rough, messed up place. We were poor, white, and a long way from home, and the ghetto knew it. I can't tell you how many times other kids beat me up. I had been raised to never, ever hit a girl, so when my 3 main tormentors turned out to be 3 black girls, I was pretty screwed. They'd kick the crap out of me every day. Though, I got pretty tough pretty fast for a fat white kid. I also got craftier. I knew when they would be at the park, which in trances they normally blocked, and I learned real quick that there were some streets they absolutely did not go down. At the time I didn't know why. Looking back, I think it was because of their brothers and where those brothers' gang didn't hold territory. While I spent my days running and making friends who weren't white, and who were also willing to have my dumb back, my middle sister had thrown herself fully into school and every related program she could, and was hardly ever home. My older sister was always out, hooking up with some guy. My mom didn't have a job, hadn't since we moved to Indiana. The only reason we had housing was because it was all Section 8, and the only reason we had food was because my mom was almost unmatched in her ability to scam the government, and any kind of financial aid or welfare or food programs. Countless were the stories of lies we all had to participate in after rehearsing them with our mom. Countless were the agents who fell for our crocodile tears. During this time, my mom was always drunk or high on crack, or both. There was a revolving door of equally messed up men she met online. They would come in, hang out with my mom, and most of them abused us. It was in this period that my mom coined her favorite saying that we all had drilled into our heads: "I don't have kids, I have servants." We were treated accordingly. She never did anything except spend time in her chat rooms and get high. We were the ones responsible for cleaning, cooking, and bills. My older sister had to get a part-time job at Wendy's just to keep the lights on and for other things we needed. If we wanted something, we either had to find the money ourselves or ask our grandparents for it. The latter was only allowed if we were also able to squeeze some money out of them, which, of course, upon obtaining it, had to be given to her immediately. There were always the holidays, though, like Halloween, where we were allowed to do whatever we wanted. The only cost was that when we came back, we had to give her all our candy, and of course, if we hadn't gotten enough, we had to go back out again. We quickly learned that the best time to go out was around 11 or 12 at night, as most people were done by then and would just dump their whole bowl into our bag. We also learned to take regular trips to where we stashed the candy and go out with nearly empty sacks, telling people we barely had any candy, so they would give us more. We also learned we could swap parts of our costumes between us, and most people wouldn't remember us. Christmas was great. We sometimes even got presents. Sometimes we even got to enjoy them for a while, before they inevitably were pawned or sold for cash. That was a recurring cycle. Anytime we got anything nice, the days were numbered until our mom pawned it. The only console we had for years was a Super Nintendo with Super Mario World 4 or something. Though, when the PS3 had been out for a few years, we finally scraped together some money and bought a PS2 for the first time. We spent days taking turns playing the 3 games we had. Amazingly, we got to enjoy it for a couple of months until it got pawned. You see, my mom had turned it into a scam. She'd pawn all our stuff, then give us an amount we had to get from our grandparents. She used that money to get back the stuff she pawned, and all the profit went to her. Our only respite was every summer, when my sister and I spent 3 months with our grandparents in Montana. But, of course, they had to pay to come pick us up and then to bring us back. As for life there, eventually a Mexican family moved in next door, and they took us in like family. They fed us when we were hungry, and made sure nobody in the neighborhood messed with us. They didn't give a damn about our mom, but her kids were untouchable. I thank my lucky stars for Jose and his sons, Omar and Marco, who became my only 2 real friends. I loved that family so much. The grandma, though she didn't speak a word of English, would growl and point us toward seats at the table and make us eat until we were full. We called her Mexicana, and she was awesome. There are other horrible stories from that period, too. I'll try to keep it brief. One time, my mom got so drunk she dragged my older sister's boyfriend out into the street, and surrounded by a bunch of drunk, cheering Mexican neighbors from the weekend party, proceeded to beat him and berate him for ditching my sister on prom night. I guess he deserved it. He was a douchebag from Puerto Rico who was trying to be a ladies' man with anything that had a pulse. Then there was the time she was completely wasted and took me to Wendy's, and while making a turn, went so fast that the passenger door of our old pickup truck just flew right off. The seatbelt didn't work either, and as I was sliding out of the truck, head a foot off the ground, she didn't even slow down. She just laughed and said, "Sink or swim, bitch." I chose swim. Eventually, when I was about 11, we had to pack everything in a single night, and my grandparents came to get us. Turns out, my mom owed too much money to drug dealers, and they told her that if she didn't pay up, they'd collect. My older sister stayed behind, now with 2 kids and pregnant with a third, living with her boyfriend, neither of them having jobs. We were back in Montana 2 days later, with my grandparents driving the entire way, only stopping for gas and food. My sister and I had to leave almost everything we owned behind. Our mom told us we could each pick 3 things to bring, and they had to be small. There was only so much room in the trailer, you know, and her stuff had to fit somehow. She made me leave my cat Vanilla, whom I'd had since rescuing her as a stray kitten. The one thing I loved and felt loved by. That was okay, though, because at least my mom was able to bring her cat, Tiger. She locked Vanilla and her newborn litter in the shed to die. My sister was able to make a secret call to Jose, who opened the shed and got her out. I was told he got them a good home with a family who seemed like they would love her. So that was okay, because they got a better life. When I cried on the drive back to Montana, she told me to shut up. When my grandpa said I was heartbroken, and she needed to respect that, she responded with, "He's my son, and I say he deserves nothing." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. We had been living back in Helena for a total of 2 months before I set my bed on fire, called the cops, and was able to get her arrested, and finally admitted into a children's hospital. Best 10 months of my childhood. 3 months at home, and I knew I had to do something bigger. One death threat to my assistant principal later, and I bought myself a year away from her. They put me in a group home where the normal staff were wonderful people, but the manager enjoyed tormenting us. It didn't bother me. While there, my mom broke my sister's arm in a fight, and although the cops were called, nothing was done, so my sister just moved out. My mom allowed it because she was a spoiled brat to her anyway. Finally, after getting out, my mom moved us to Salt Lake City, Utah, with my older sister's biological father, as they'd gotten back together. There were, for some reason, problems with enrolling me in school, probably due to only receiving about half the education I should have during those years, and the years they did have records of mostly had less than 20% attendance. I had long since given up on school. Not that it was too hard, honestly. It was just so damn boring. They weren't teaching me anything I didn't know, and school didn't mean a damn in my grand scheme of things. After several months of living there, I finally got enrolled. I still didn't do anything. Just showed up to the classes they told me to and sat there. I never even put my name on a paper at that school. I managed to get kicked out quicker than I'd planned. My sister's dad just wanted to know why, and told me I had to write a report, at least 1,500 words explaining why. That kind of shocked me. Nobody had ever asked me about anything, so I wrote it, 1,500 words exactly because I'm not a free worker, and it was an honest answer. He got home and read it aloud in front of me and my mom. As he was reading, he started making a shocked face and would look at me with concern. I had never had that, not from someone that close to things. Even my grandparents had been powerless to stop my mom, but this man, maybe he cared. Maybe he could help. He never got to finish before my mom ripped the paper from his hands, tore it up, and started screaming at and hitting me for telling lies, like the little bastard I am. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Years later, still in Salt Lake City, the situation was much the same. The three of us were living in a run-down apartment complex. We hardly ever had food. When there was, it wouldn't last long, and I only ate what my mom didn't want. My sister's dad and my mom had gotten back into drugs again. He worked 20-hour shifts as a mechanic for $10 just to make not enough money, and on top of that was dealing drugs constantly to fill the gaps. And of course, to feed his addiction, though mainly my mom's. I'd been kicked out of almost every school nearby and was about to get kicked out again. He was hardly ever home. She did nothing but drink, get high, and watch crappy soap operas on antenna TV. I had a junk computer that still ran Windows 98. The only two things I could do on it were write in Word and play space pinball. I had another PS2 for a while, until some of her friends came over while I was at school, went into my room, and stole the cables and most of my games. Though, more likely she sold them for more drugs. From then on, I had to use the power cable from an old printer. It wasn't the right one, and the console would only run for about 5 minutes before shutting off, taking hours to power back on again. This was, without a doubt, the darkest time of my childhood. I had no friends. The school and all the teachers hated me, thought I was just some lazy dumb kid. The one adult who did care had already been twisted up by my mom. He'd get home at 2 or 3 in the morning. She'd tell him some story, and he'd drag me out of bed, screaming at me sometimes for 2 hours straight. I was a mess of tears and snot, too hysterical to even get a word in. She'd be on the couch smoking, grinning while he was at work. And if I wasn't at school, she'd make me put on the worst clothes I owned, have me rub dirt on myself, and then drop me off in a parking lot somewhere. I was only allowed to use a payphone to call her once I'd made enough money. But, of course, it had to be the amount she wanted, plus the 75 cents to call her. Couldn't be short now, could I? One day, when I refused, and she started getting angry, she yelled at me, threatened me while I sat on the edge of my bed. She told me, "If you don't move right now, I'm going to hit you until you can't move." I told her to do her best. The first hit caught me right on the ear. It hurt so much I instantly started to cry. I stood up and looked her dead in the eyes. She was a large woman, but big women raise big boys, and I was already almost 6 feet at 15. She was big, but I was finally bigger. She swung again, and I don't know how I stayed standing. I was seeing stars and birds. I guess maybe she was right. I was born to spite a bitch after all. She told me that she brought me into this world and she sure as hell could take me out of it. I grinned and told her, "I told you, do your best." She slammed the door in my face and never laid a hand on me again. The only friends I had in the world were our dog Yossi, a goofy, derpy mutt who loved literally anything he could lick, and our cat Horthy, who slept with me almost every night while I cried. Eventually, things came to a head when my sister's dad's parole officer finally caught him and sent him back to prison, and my mom had no way of taking care of me. So, she sold me for drug money, to my own grandparents. She was asking $500, but they were already so drained financially they could only afford $100 and still come get me. She took the money. A few days later they came to get me. I was only able to fit my clothes and a few essential belongings into the truck and could only bring Horthy with me. Yossi was left behind. He got out of the car he was living in a few weeks later and was hit by a car. Eventually, to my mom I became $100 that went straight into her veins in a single high. That's all it cost to have me. I haven't seen her since. She's tried a few times to reach out. She can try all she wants. I'll never let her back into my life. I let go of the anger and animosity toward her a long time ago. It's not a grudge that keeps me away. Maybe she's a different person, and maybe she's really changed, but it's just not worth the risk to my happiness. I don't know why she's mad. After all, she was the one who taught me that people are numbers, and that bitch is a walking deficit. I know that was a lot of heavy stuff I just laid out. Honestly, I can't describe how it feels to finally let some of that out, after all these years. I'm in a much better place now, and while my life has a lot of issues right now, I know I will get through it. The man I talked about, my sister's dad, well, he's my dad now, too. He turned his life around, moved back north to be close to my sister and me. He's earned the title of dad to me, and I've come to love him as the one father I always needed. My middle sister is now married with a kid of her own. She has a full-time job that pays her good money, and a degree in social work that she hopes to use someday to help kids like us. My older sister is still living in Indiana, but hopes to move her family back to where our hearts have never left, Montana. She's got an amazing boyfriend who treats her well, and 5 kids who are lucky to call her mom. Both sisters are the best moms a kid could hope for, and I feel nothing but pride and love for them. My mom was an evil woman. She got into your head. It was worse than making you feel bad. She made you feel like you were less than nothing and made you believe you deserved it. She used any weakness, any emotion, whatever she could. She was a black hole that sucked the love, happiness, and life from everyone and everything around her. She wasn't a mom, she was a parasite. Nothing more, nothing less. That being said, I don't blame my mom anymore, because it simply doesn't do any good. However, I have plenty of blame to go around to all the useless adults along the way that could have helped, but didn't. I can't tell you how many times we tried telling our teachers, the school social workers, cops that were called, anyone who would listen about the crap that was happening, and none of them, not a single one, lifted a finger to help. I guess being poor makes you mute. Our grandparents even tried to get custody once, but the courts ruled in our mom's favor, because there was no proof of physical abuse and kids should be with their mothers. If I could have 1 minute in a room with every one of those assholes, I would make them feel the hopelessness and helplessness they all left us with. That aside, here are a few positive lessons I've taken away from all of it. Blood isn't always family, and family doesn't always have to be blood. Despite what you're told, you get to choose your family. You don't owe anyone anything just because you were born. You didn't ask to be born, it wasn't your choice, and you are the only owner of your life. No matter how bad it gets or how dark it is, there's always a way forward. Do whatever you need to keep moving forward. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to talk about it. Find the people who love you, no matter who they are. Those are the only people worth having in your life. Don't feel bad about getting rid of the rest. The only way to stop cancer from spreading is to cut it out. Not all abuse is physical. The worst wounds are the ones nobody can see. You can survive anything. I did, and I'm nothing special. Update 1. Asterisk. I was so scared to post this, but the support I've gotten honestly means more than I can describe. Enough with the warm fuzzies. I promise the next chapter will be more interesting if anyone is interested. So here we go. The good, the bad, and the worst of new things that have happened and some stories I always wanted to tell but left out in my first post. Buckle up, I guess. First, the most recent, the wicked tornado returns. I should have figured my mom's return to my life would happen eventually, but honestly, didn't expect it now, or like this. She showed up at my work. Let me set the scene. It's a Tuesday. I live back in Montana, working stacking boxes at a very basic retail warehouse. I turn around, and there she is, bigger and older, but unmistakable in that way only truly resilient narcissists can be. Leaning on a cane, hair puffed up and dyed black again, like she thinks she's still 35 and not pushing 60. Our eyes locked for a frozen second. She tried using her honey voice, the one that always preceded a con. I froze, but the years of therapy and being out of her orbit stopped me from running, mumbling, or God forbid, apologizing for just breathing. She started with the crocodile tears and the old lines, "I'm sick, I need you, I've changed, family's all that matters." I was expecting some desperate plea for money, wrong. Or maybe she wanted to move in, double wrong. This time it was more complicated. She had set her family wrecking powers on some new poor sap in Seattle. Apparently, he had money and was catching on to her bullshit, so she wanted me to play the part of her loving, loyal son, for a visit to boost her credibility and help run a fresh round of her "I'm just a sweet, misunderstood woman who loves her family" scam. I laughed. I actually laughed in her face, like a maniac. For the first time, I saw her surprised, like her old playbook was missing some pages. I just told her, "You should have called an actor, I don't do free work." Then I went back to work. Last I heard, she moved back to Spokane and immediately got kicked out of a housing assistance program for fighting with a 40-year-old neighbor over disability checks. Family gossip, some good, some crazy. My older sister finally did it, packed up her kids, loaded a rented trailer, and arrived in Helena like a one-woman convoy. The car broke down halfway, of course, but Jose, from Indiana, organized a GoFundMe after we reconnected on Facebook. Yes, the same Jose whose mom saved us in Gary. He's a dad now, owns a landscaping business, and apparently still remembers when my mom threatened to call immigration to have his grandma deported for not sharing her government cheese. Yeah, that happened. My older sister is thriving now. Works at a daycare where I swear half her clients are local teachers and social workers, doing for other kids everything we desperately needed and never got. Last week, one of her adopted toddlers asked her if she had any real family. She just smiled and told him, "Honey, you get to choose your family. Look at us," and hugged the 5 kids she has. My other sister, my rock, the one who always protected me, is, unironically, killing it. She got a job as a paralegal for a firm that helps get kids out of bad foster situations. She's got a new boyfriend who everyone really likes, and he comes over to play Mario Kart with us. Old habits die hard. She finally opened up about Jimmy and that house in Indiana. We both talked about therapy. Not gonna lie, it broke me a little to know she carried the same guilt and confusion I did for so long. Now, the crazy twist. Grandpa's secret. Remember my mom's parents, the only stable people we had, even if the courts didn't listen to them. Well, after my last post, my grandpa reached out. He's 87 now, and sharper than ever. He told me a secret my mom never let slip. After they took us in the last time, they hired a private investigator to follow my mom around for 3 months. That's right, they took their social security checks and paid an investigator to try and prove we were being abused so the court couldn't ignore it. This investigator discovered that my mom had been staging car accidents, intentionally getting rear-ended, always after starting a new insurance policy. She'd fake injuries and then split the payout with shady chiropractors. She'd coach the other driver on how to lie to the cops, to make the accident look plausible and get bigger payouts. She even wore fake crutches and forgot she was perfectly capable of walking when she was in front of a select audience, me, grandma, the neighbors, but not the insurance company. My grandpa gave me a binder, I kid you not, filled with the pie's notes, pictures, and police reports. My mom almost got charged with major insurance fraud, but the key witness, her last partner in the fraud, disappeared after getting arrested for another crime. After that, they dropped it, since our state attorney at the time wasn't prioritizing victimless fraud cases. My grandpa has some choice words about that guy. How did this come to light? Because this year, Mom got caught again. Tried a watered-down version with some guy she met off Facebook who, unfortunately for her, was already being investigated for social security theft. She ran, vanished, and is now living in a used Ford Aerostar, according to her current boyfriend's explanation, who called me asking if I ever loved cats. Recent craziest moment, the envelope. Fast forward to this March. I come home from work to find a thick, battered envelope jammed in my mailbox. No return address, but the postmark is Spokane. Inside, 13 old photos, some of me and my sisters as kids, some of old pets, some of random buildings I half recognize, along with an 8-page handwritten letter, in my mom's cramped handwriting, and a social security card that doesn't belong to anyone I've ever known. The letter is a wild ride. She blames the system for her mistakes, claims she tried to make it right, but people wouldn't let her. Then says she's leaving town. By the time I read this, she'll be gone and wants me to remember the good times. Tries a bad apology for some specific details, but it's thinly veiled blame shifting. I wish you had helped me be a better mother. Got a real laugh out of me on the last page. She writes, if you ever want to find me, ask around for the blue tent on the edge of Spokane Falls. Spoiler, Googling that gets you like a billion weird tent communities and Bigfoot sightings. I almost threw it out, but my therapist said to keep it, as a reminder. Not that people change, but that I don't owe her anything, not even closure. Amazing connections, new doors. This is where life gets better again. Because after reading my last post, 2 people from my childhood reached out. One was a former social worker who, get this, actually tried to help, but said she was always shut down by her supervisors or judges, who thought mothers always knew best. We met at a coffee shop and she almost started crying, saying she felt like she had failed us. We talked for hours, mostly me, thanking her for at least trying. The other was my Mexican neighbor's daughter, who was about my age. She told me her family remembered me as the skinny white kid they couldn't fatten up, and always wondered what happened to me and my sisters. She invited me to her grandma's 80th birthday party in Chicago next spring. So looks like I'll be taking a cross-country train.